Very well. So now that we have Android Studio installed, what we're going to do is we are going to create a very simple Android app. Now, realizing that this Android app here, I don't expect you to know anything about Android Studio, nor do I expect you to know anything about developing Android applications. So at this point here, all you need to do is to follow along what I'm doing. So this is just to get us going with Android Studio. So to get our feet wet, as we say, with Android Studio. Okay, so just follow along. I also expect that you won't understand everything that we're going to go through here, which is totally fine because we'll learn all of this stuff as we go along in the course. So don't worry if things don't make sense. Just follow along and enjoy. All right, so once you open your Android Studio, depending on whether you have had other things that you've done before with Android Studio, you should see this. If not, no worries, okay? This should be empty. You won't be able to see anything there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say start a new Android Studio project. So click here, and then we have this awesome prompt here, awesome wizard, if you will, that allows us to then choose what is it that we want to start doing, right? At the top here, we have phone or tablet, Wear OS, TV, Android Auto, Android things, and so forth. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on phone and tab. So the first tab here. And then we have different options here. So we have an option of adding no activity at all. Of course, we don't know what activity is right now, but we will understand all of that. Or we can add basic activity or empty activity. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go ahead and add an empty activity. Okay, so I'm going to say next. This is where we're going to add a name for our application. So I'm just going to go ahead and say show name now, something like that. Okay. You notice also we have a package name here. So the package name is very important because that is the ID of your application. Again, we'll talk more about that later. Okay. So this is where we can save our project. So you can change to where you want to save your project. Right. So if you click here, then it will take you to other places where you can add where you want this project to live. So it doesn't matter where, as long as the place where you would know. And for languages here, we have options of Kotlin and Java. So in this course, we are going to be using Java. So obviously, we're going to say Java. Now, the minimum API level here, we will talk more about that at a later time. But for now, we want to make sure that this simple app runs on more than 95% of devices. Okay, so just click on API 19. So you can click here and get any API you want. Again, I don't expect you to know what this API really is, but it's just levels of different versions of Android at this moment. So we're going to go with KitKat 19. That's totally fine. And we're going to say finish. And in a few seconds, we have this beauty showing off here. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on, but we are going just to focus on one thing, which is to get things running and get our first application working. So this is the Boilerplate App. Okay, so we have this XML activity here where we can use to create our user interface. And we have the actual Java file, so the entry point, if you will. Now, as it is right now, we can actually go ahead and run. So if I click here, assuming we were able to create our emulator previously, we can just go ahead and click here. So in your case, you probably won't have all of this. You probably just have available virtual devices, only one, because that's what you may have created already previously, right? So for me, I have a few, as you can see, and I also have already one connected. So I'm going to choose the one that's connected there and say, okay. And as you can see here, it was hiding. This is the connected device that I have. So if you don't have one, of course, you choose from the devices that are available. And in a second, it all runs and you can see it says hello world there. Very good. So where is this coming from? Well, this is actually coming from our activity main XML. As you can see, there is this hello world, which is really small, and we can make it bigger as that. We can also go ahead and close that part down there so we have more space, and you can see this is hello world. Now we have two panes here and we'll discuss more all of that, but for now you can see there's hello world. If you click on that, there's a lot of attribute and so forth. So very good. So this is what's happening here. That's why you see this here, right? Very good. So nothing out of this world. Nevertheless, this is your first hello world Android app. Now let's change things a little bit here so that we can actually customize this app to our liking. I'm going to come back here, make this a little bit smaller. And for now, we are going to delete this. So if you click and delete, right, it's all now gone. Okay, so now it's all empty. And what we're going to do is we are going to add a button in the middle. Now, where do we find a button? Well, a button, you can see here, we have this palette. There's different options, buttons, widgets, and so forth. Let's go to buttons. There is our button. You can drag it over, right? Keep dragging. And you can see there are all those lines that are aligning things around. So it tells us there would be in the middle of the screen, right? Because it is in the middle, as you see, all those dashed lines. If you let it go, all of a sudden you see you have those buttons. In fact, I should say that button, because there's just only one button. Okay, so this is actually to the right here is mimicking whatever we're doing to the left. Very good. And of course, we still have our attributes there. No problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to constrain this button, meaning I want to make sure that every time this button has a constraint to the top. The moment you do that, right? Let me get rid of that again. Put it back here so we can do this again. So if you click, you see it turns this color green, which means you can actually click and hold and then drag. You see that line there? If you go like that, it snaps to the top. That means now if you bring it down, it gives us that this is always going to be 348 units to the bottom like that. Okay, so we can play around with that. This is very important, as we will see at a later time, but this allows us to then make sure that every time, no matter what, this button is going to be about 248 units down from the top. Okay, so it's snapped there. Okay, and we'll do that to the left and that also to the right like that. Okay. Very good. So we have our button. If you double click this button here, notice that you see this happening. What that means is that it wants you to change the title of the button. I'm going to say here, show name. If I can spell correctly, of course, show name like that. Okay, there we go. So there is the button show name. But at this point, there are a lot of things we can do with this button in terms of attributes and so forth. But at this point, all we want to do is to make sure that this button is indeed in the middle. So if you click on it, you see all the constraints and everything. If you click away, you see there's nothing there. If you save this and give a quick run again, say okay, it'll take a few seconds. And you can see there is our show button. Now, because it's all given, we just added a button. Notice the beauty here, because if you click on that, it actually has that ripple effect. Very good. All right, so let's continue to move here. So what I'm going to do next is add a text here, because the idea here is to make sure that when we tap on this button, we want to show some sort of text here. Okay, so how do we add a text? Well, we come here to our palette, right? Click there. There is text. What do we want? We just a text view. So I'm going to put it right below there. Okay, let it go. And now I want to make sure that this text view is always below our show name button. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before and snap it there. But now it's too close. So I'm going to just move it a little bit down there to my liking, and that looks good. Now I could also do the same, add the right constraint and as well as the left constraint as that. Okay, if you save this, and notice we also have this icon at the top here. So what this is, it means, okay, if we are doing our development here and we don't constantly have to rerun everything, because that means we'll have to compile our code every time we do so. So if you say like this, in fact, let me move this a little bit to the right. If you hover over here, it says apply changes. If you click, all of a sudden it goes and shows the text view there because it applied the changes right away without having to recompile everything. Okay, so it's very handy. So we have it all checked out here. Now let's go back to show name here. You notice to the attributes, we have this thing called ID. Well, it turns out everything in our Android here has to have an ID. So this has an ID and this also has an ID. Okay, because this is the visual representation of our application. Now, the reason why we need these IDs is because we need to call those in our main activity.java, which we haven't looked at yet. We will in a second here. Now, because we just added them, they usually give us IDs as such. So it just says button. So we can change those IDs if we want, which we will later, obviously. Okay, but at this point, I'll just let it be like that. So this is ID button for this button, and for this text view here is going to be text view as such. All right, and we can actually change the text that it shows here, because right now you see it says text view, and most times we don't want it to say anything, or we just want to be empty like that, but it's still there, right? Very good. So if you want to add something there, you could. But at this point, we just want to leave it as it is because we want to make sure when we run our application, we're not going to see anything there. Only when we say show name, then we'll be able to see whatever the text view has. Okay, so we are pretty much done with our user interface for now at least. So let's go back to our main activity here. This is where the fun begins. So this is our entry point, our activity, if you will. Again, don't worry if none of this makes sense because the idea here is just to get us going and then we'll explain all this stuff at a later time, okay? All right, so let's go ahead here and fetch these IDs, or in this case, fetch these views, right? These controllers here, right? The button and also the text view, because we need to connect this user interface with our Java so that we are able to then write the logic which will allow us to click show name and show whatever we want in the text view. To get these, this is the reason why we have IDs. They must have IDs, but that's the only way we're going to be able to get them from our main activity. So at the top here of this class here, inside here, okay, make sure it's inside here. I'm going to say private, and I'm going to say button, because this is indeed a button type, right? So we're going to append this button there. And notice we have an issue right away. That means, well, it's a widget, so we need to install it. So if you click here and click in this, say import, and voila, we'll have that import. Nothing is showing there because it's all hidden. No problem. Okay, so now we're going to say, give it a name. I'm going to say my button, like that. I'm going to do the same thing with my text view, right? Because we need to pass the type of the things that we want to call from our user interface. Okay, it's my text view. I'm just going to say here, show name. Oops. I'm going to say here, show text, like that. Very good. Now we have a reference to button and show text object types, right? Button and text. Not necessarily to actually these guys here yet. We do that, meaning connecting to these IDs, next. To do that, well, we go into our own create, because this is where everything happens. Right below here, I'm going to go ahead and say my button, and I'm going to find it. I'm going to say find view by ID. Ah, wonderful. So here I'm going to say r.id.button. So what are we doing now? We've created at the top here my button reference, if you will, right? And now here, what are we saying is we are getting the reference to our ID button, which we created here. This ID here, which is button, to say, okay, let's go now and get a handle of this show name here so we can actually do things to it. That's what we're doing here. We're going to do the same thing to our show text. Find by ID, r.id.show text, or did I say text view? We didn't change anything, did we? So these IDs have to be obviously exactly the same. Let's click here, there. You can see the ID is text view. Okay, so it has to be exactly the same. Very good. So now we have those two. At this point here, I can show you that we indeed have this show text, which is this text view here, right? We can actually handle it inside our main Java activity. Look at this. I can go ahead and say show text dot access something, and I can set a text to that show text, which is a text view, as you can see there, right? And inside here, I can pass something like, hello, I am here, like that. If I save this and do a quick, I should be able to see, hello, I'm here. All right, very good. Of course, this is not what we intend. What we intend to do is to make sure that when my button is clicked, we then change this show text to whatever we want to change to. All right, but at least I showed you that now show text, which is exactly this text view that we added here, we can access it indeed inside of our main activity. And we can set the text to whatever we want. That's why we're able to see this. Hello, I'm here. All right, so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to wire up our show name so that when they click, we're going to show some sort of text here. Very nice. I'll see you next. So we have a way of getting our IDs, of getting our buttons and our text in our main activity, as I previously showed you. Very good. So the idea here, again, like I said before, is to get this show name button active so that when we click, we actually show something down here. Well, to do that, we need to hook this show name into an event listener. So how to do that? Well, I can come below our My Button because it has to be after we have instantiated our button, meaning we have actually created our button, right? We have added the ID, we have grabbed the ID and put in our My Button here, okay? So now I'm going to say My Button dot set on, like that, click listener. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and say enter like that. I'm going to pass on click listener like that. Okay, that was a lot of code, boilerplate code. So don't worry about any of this, okay? So I'm going to try again. Let's do this once again because I want to make sure we understand. So I say My Button, say dot set on click listener. The moment you have like that, just hit enter. And then inside here, say new on click listener. The first thing you see there, view on click listener, hit enter, and voila. You don't have to type all of that stuff. So what this is doing is we are saying, okay, we have the button and we're going to attach it on click listener, which means this will allow the button to be listening for taps. When user taps, so something's going to happen. So if user tap, what we're going to happen is this on click method or function is going to be called, which means anything that is inside here will run. So at this point here, if I go ahead and copy this, in fact, get rid of that and put inside here, show text, right? We should be able to see something amazing happen. So I'm going to go ahead and click that button there. And notice now it's all clear because now we are not adding anything to the text view as earlier because we put inside here. Only when we click show name that we will see this hello, I'm here. Let's give it a try. Click and hello, I'm here is showing. Very good. So now we've done a lot here. So we created our button and our text, which are connected to what? To our user interface here that we created earlier, right? Very good. So then with that, we're able to set on click listener to our button because that's what buttons are supposed to do. And then we say when a click is detected from our button, we want to set the text to our show text, which is this element that we added here earlier, to what? To say hello, I'm here. That's why you're able to see hello, I'm here. Very good. Now, this is wonderful. As you can see, we can come here and change to something else. Hello, this is fun. Save. Let's do a quick reload there. Apply change. Okay, so hello, this is fun. So we can come down here and change the text we want to see, and that will also be reflected when we click the show name button. But obviously, this is not very fun because that implies that every time we want to see something different, we have to come to our code and write whatever we want to see. That's not great. And also, on top of that, we can see that we don't have this custom way in which we can actually show something that has been entered at the top here. So what we need to do is add some sort of a field where users can enter text so that when say show, we're going to grab that text and show it here. Okay, to show a name or whatever text that was added. To do that, well, let's go back to our main XML here because this is where our user interface, as we said before, is. So to do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a plain text. So what this plain text is, it allows us to add text ourselves. So if I drag and put it right about there, look at that. That looks wonderful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to constrain this one to the top and move it down here because I want this to be close. And remember, we have this top constraint, right? I'm going to delete that. And instead, I'm going to constrain it to be at the bottom of this username like that. So I can move things around. And you notice everything now moves around because everything is connected to each other. So if I move this, notice that everything moved as well. So if I move this a little bit down, everything moves along because our text view is of course constrained with our show name, and show name is constrained with our name as well. Okay, very good. So there we go. So our name here, I can go ahead and do the same we did before. I'm going to just constrain to the right as well as to the left, and I can also use this if I hover over in the corners. I can make this larger if I want to do so, like that. I can do the same with our button, right? I can do like this and make it as large as I possibly can or want. Okay, very good. I can do the same with anything really, but at this point here, I'm just going to leave the text view as it is. So very good. So now we have our text name here, or I should say our edit text, as this widget is called in Android Studio because it allows us to edit a text from user input. Now we can do all sort of things. So if you double click here, notice now we have this attribute that we can change. So the text that is showing here, we can just get rid of it. Or I can just say something like enter name, like that. If you save, it's going to say enter name to let users know you're supposed to enter name there. There's other attributes we can change, and we'll see that at a later time. Okay, very good. So now if I go ahead and save this and do that quick run there, and come down here, it's going to go ahead and reload everything. And now voila, you can see enter name. Very good. So the show name still works because we haven't changed anything, right? But it doesn't show whatever it's entered here. So what I'm going to do now is going back here in our user interface. And of course, we're going to change the ID. We can leave it as it is. In fact, we're just going to leave it as it is right now because since it's a very simple application, we don't need to customize this. We're going to just use as it is. But as you will see later, we probably going to be better off creating our own IDs that make more sense. Very good. So now we're going to do the same thing as we did with show name button and the text view in our main. So we need to grab those. So at the top here as member variables, I'm going to go ahead and say private. I'm going to say edit text. I'm going to call this enter name. I'm going to do the same private, and there we go. So now we have edit text enter name, and I'm going to instantiate it right about here. I'm going to say enter name is equal to what? Find view by ID, like that, r.id dot edit text. Why edit text again? Because we said this is the ID for our edit text. There we go. So now we have a handle for our edit text. Now, how do we grab whatever we get from our edit text? Well, very simply, we can come just inside because we want to grab all of that once users have clicked this button, right? Once they click this button, want to get whatever it's inside here and append or add to our text here. So there is a method that we can do that with. I can come down here and create a variable, cell string, because it's string type. Again, don't worry about it if you don't understand what a string is. Just think of a little bucket that we're creating that will contain strings like text, okay? I'm going to say name is equal to what? Well, I'm going to then get our enter name, which is this, right? And we're going to extract whatever it's inside of it. So I'm going to say enter name dot get text. I'm going to say toString just to make sure that whatever is coming in is indeed string, okay? Very good. So now we've said whatever is inside of our edit text, it's going to be in this name variable string. So now I can use it, this name, inside here. So I can change a few things here, say hello. I'm going to concatenate, add a plus, saying we're going to put together this hello and whatever we're getting for name. So I'm going to say name like that. Save. And apply changes there. It's going to go ahead and update everything. And I'm going to get rid of all of this. Let's say Paul. Get rid of that. Show name. Hello, Paul. If I say Paulo instead, show hello, Paulo. Say Nelson. Hello, Paulo Nelson. Very cool, isn't it? So now we were able to attach not only our text view, right? Now we made this more customizable, meaning whatever you enter here and hit enter or show name in this case, it will be appended and shown at the bottom here. And we can change the size of this text as well. So if we come to our main activity here, click here, right? Make sure we're clicking on the item that we want. It's going to be hard because it is actually an item that we got rid of. And the other way to select this item here is coming to our component tree here because it has all of the components that we added on the screen. Let's see, we want this AB text. There we go. So now it is indeed selected. And we can come down here and say view all attributes. And I can also search there and say size and come down to text size and click right there. And there are some default. Let's make it a little bit bigger, say 18 SB. If you save this and rerun again, I'm gonna go ahead and see it's a little bit bigger. All right, very good, very good. So you've built your first Android application. And I know, as I said before, this may not make a lot of sense, but as long as you followed along and you were able to see what I was able to show you here, right, on your own, as long as you're able to click on show name and show actually the items or the text that you've entered here, then you are winning. This is wonderful. The rest we will learn in deeper details at a later time. I just want to get you going here, get you excited, and starting putting together a very simple Android Studio application. All right, very good. So what I want you to do, because in the next videos we are going to continue learning basically about Java, okay? But what I want you to do now is, before you go to the next video, is I want you to play around with these concepts. So now you have a very little concept of Android Studio and how to build a very simplistic application. Even though you may not understand everything, how about changing things around here? Maybe you can figure out how to change the color of this button. Hint, hint, you can double click here and go to, for instance, style of the button. You can go around and click around here and see the changes that will appear to the left here. Okay, so play around with this. Nothing will get broken here. Change the show name to something else. Just play with this concept, because that's how we actually learn stuff. But nevertheless, congratulations on your first Android application, and I hope this gets you excited to keep learning about Android. All right, I'll see you next. So what we're going to do now is understand a little bit more our IDE here, our Android Studio, because this is the tool of choice we're going to be using to build our Android apps. As you saw before, we were able to also use this amazing editor here to create Java programs that are separate from Android so that we can learn about Java. Right, very good. So at this point here, we are still in Java. So if I open my panel project here, so click on project, you can see that we have two packages. There's this app package and we have learn.java package. Okay, so now that we're done, per se, quote unquote, learning about Java, we're going to go back to our app. But most importantly, also to notice here is the fact that at the top here, we can actually change the views for our project. Okay, so if I click on project here, notice you're going to show the project layout here. Okay, but if I keep going here, if I go to, say, Android at the bottom here, it will just show the Android part of things. Meaning now I can come down here and you can see we still have our Java part inside of Android and so forth, right? So this is usually what you want to be at, especially when you want to see the Android hierarchy, the Android tree of our app. You can still see this Learn Java module that we created so that we could learn about Java. Very good. So at this point here, I'm going to go back, as I say here, let's go down to Android so we can have this Android view. And we can get rid of my class.java. There, so we have an empty window here. Okay, so while I'm under Android, I can come down and go to also project. So I can just look at the Android project if you want to do so. Okay, so there's a lot of things here. You can see we still have that app folder, which has the build folder, libs for library, and have the resource folders there. Okay, so at this point here, I just want to show a little bit of our editor here because there's a lot of things going on. So first of all, let's go back to our Android. Doesn't really matter at this point, but it's always nice to have this Android there. Very good. So inside here, you can see to the left here, when we click on this project, it hides or opens our hierarchy project here. So it shows us all the files that we have inside of our app Android. So we have folders here, the main folder being the app. You can close and open. And you can still see this module here. Okay, very good. So inside of our app, we have other folders inside of it. Okay, we have this Java folder here, which if you open through, you're going to see a few things inside. So these are packages. The packages in Java and of course in Android here allows us to put classes that are related. Okay, so very much so as we saw when we talked about the Java class library, everything is organized in packages. The same thing we do with Android. Remember that we are going to write Android apps using Java in this course. All right, so there are different packages here. So this one here is for test, Android test, and so forth. Let's look at the first one. This is what we have been looking at previously when we first start creating our first Android app. Okay, so if you click there, double click, you can see then in the main panel here, window, we have our code. And I hope by now you understand more about classes if you've been following us from previous videos where we talked about Java and so forth. If not, you may know already about Java. But now I hope you understand what a class is and so forth. So now this may make more sense. Okay? Very good. So we have our main activity there. And also we have this folder called manifest. So we will talk about that in more detail. But if you open there, there's this Android and manifest. Okay, very good. So there's a lot of things here, but most importantly, we can continue going to the res file. This is where we have our resources, because each application has its own entity, its own sandbox. It has to have all of the parts necessary to actually run and become an application, right? So resources, this is where we have all these other folders or packages. There's a drawable. So a drawable is essentially anything that we can actually draw onto the screen, right? One thing you also notice is that everything here inside of resources, most things anyway, are in XML format. The reason why is very simple. Android divides everything into separate folders, right? So we have the logic part, which is the Java part, and then we have the user interface part, which then can be represented in XML. In fact, if I go down here, we see this layout, XML. We see that we have this layout folder here. If we double click, you'll notice this happens. We've seen this before when we are putting together this application here, the enter or show name application. Let me make this a little bigger so you can actually see what's going on here. Let me get rid of the attributes so you can see there. Okay, so what's happening here is that this is the visual representation of our application, of our app. Now, there's a lot going on here, but let's start dissecting one thing at a time. First of all, as I explained before, everything that pertains to user interface, meaning everything that you can actually see, such as this, right, is rendered as an XML. You may say, well, okay, how do I see that XML then, right? This code that is used to actually render this. Well, if you come at the bottom here, notice we have this text there. If you click on text, and all of a sudden you have the actual XML. So XML is another language per se that allows us to describe our user interface. It's very interesting how this works because as you can see here, we have all this code that may seem very hard or very foreign to us. But really, it's not that hard. What's happening here is, like I said, we are structuring our user interface so that it shows up like this to the right. So now you can see the moment you click the text, as we did here, now we have this panel here to the left that is pure XML, and then we have this right here, which is the visual representation of this XML here. In fact, if I click here, you notice it goes and highlights what we have clicked in the code. Right? It says here is button. That means we are inside of this button here. So for each button here, think of it as a hierarchy of a class as well. So this is the class and these are the properties or attributes. That means the button class here, right? It has Android ID property. It has a layout width property. And you see all these names make sense. Layout width. What do you think that is? It is the width of the layout. What layout? The button layout. Okay, so you can come here and actually change. If I just say show and save, you can see now it just said show in our button. Make this bigger. It no longer says show name. Okay, go back and say show name and also change this there. Okay, so you can actually build user interfaces both ways. You can use the text, or in this case, the XML layout here, where you can start adding things very easily. For instance, if I get rid of this, I can come here and say ID. Instead of having to type Android and then ID and all that stuff, you can just go ahead and say ID as such, hit enter, and enter again. This signifies that we're going to say add plus ID. We're adding an ID for our text here, or indeed our text view. And you can see everything gets highlighted as well. So we can put the ID that we want, right? Obviously, that's not the best ID ever. I'm going to go back to what we had before. Just wanted to show you. So you will see me actually using back and forth the actual XML, typing code here, XML, or using the design view, as you can see here. So here you can just drag and drop anything that you want. In fact, fun fact, when I first started doing Android development many years ago, we didn't have all of this. everything you had to do was to come here in XML and type the user interface. So if you're now starting doing Android development, you should feel so lucky because now you have all these amazing tools. Very good. So back to design. So we saw the text, the XML here, where we can add views, or we can actually type views, right? If I want to do button, I can also just go like that, and button is created right away. And then we can start adding all the attributes. Don't worry, we will go into more details as we progress in the course. We're going to go to design at this point. So this is probably what you're most used to so far, right? If you look back when we put together this little application here. Now, within this window here, within this part of our IDE, you notice that there's a lot of other things as well, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but no worries, you don't have to learn everything in this video all at once. But I want to show you the basics. You see here, this is the representation, as I say, of our user interface. To the right here, we have the actual wiring of everything that we put inside of our screen. So this is how things are going to be displayed on our screen. And this is actually the user interface overview for us as we design our view. Okay, so now here, as you saw before, we can drag and drop all of these widgets in our palette here. Okay, so in our palette to the right, you can see we have text. So if you click on this common, as you say here, this is a common palette here. So if you click on text, it's going to give you all of these different text widgets that we can actually drag and drop into our view. All right. Very good. So there's different kinds. And if you want a button, of course, you come down to button here. Or if you're pressed in time, you can always come down here and search, right? You can say, for instance, you want a button, just start typing button, and it gives you all the different flavors of buttons. If you want text, you do that, and all the different flavors of text. Okay? But then you have other widgets. These are a little bit more composed widgets, such as views and image views, web views, and so forth. You have layouts. We will talk about more about layouts. There's constraints, which we've used before. These are the constraints that you can constrain all these widgets within the screen. Okay, there's containers and so many other things. And at the bottom here, the beauty is we also have this thing called component tree. What the component tree does, it shows the tree of our user interface. So as we add things, we should have some sort of way in which we can know exactly how are all these widgets related to one another. In this case here, notice we have the constraint. Constraint meaning, as you can see, this is highlighted, right? The surrounding of our view here. And then inside, we have the button. It tells you exactly there it is a button, and it highlights everything as we click them. Go to the text view, the bottom, and the edit text, there it is. Okay? So it shows us everything that is inside this tree of widgets that we've put forth. All right, so I'll stop here for now because I know this may be a little bit overwhelming, but as you see, it's not that bad, at least the basics. So in the next video, we'll continue talking about a little bit more Android Studio here. That way we understand a little bit more of what things that we can do here. Like I said, obviously there's a lot more we can do with this IDE, but I just want to get you a little bit more familiar with this IDE before we start actually doing Android development. All right, perfect. I'll see you next. So continuing with our little tour here in Android Studio, we see at the top that we have other things as well. In fact, let's go all over the top here. So at the very top, you can see it just shows some sort of a path, like a breadcrumb path showing where we are exactly right now. So we're inside of our activity main XML, as you can see here, and it just tells us exactly where it is located. So it's inside of our source, which has a main, which has resources, layout, and then we have the file. Okay. Very good. Then we have here this make project. So if you click on this, it will just go ahead and recompile everything to create an actual project. Okay. We don't usually use that one because we just usually use this green button here that says that it's just going to go ahead and run it. Very good. And of course, we have this drop down menu here. If you click on this drop down menu, it's got all sort of things. But most importantly, what we use is the app. As you can see here, and when we were using Java, creating that module in Java, we use this my class. So in this case here, it should be at the app, which means then when we run, it's going to run this project as just an Android app. And you can see also there's this very nice icon which represents Android, the droid, as we call it, right? And here we have this other icon, which means apply changes right away. So usually if we go ahead and run this application and we make some changes, if you look here inside of our emulator, what happens is everything was recompiled. Now, there are times when we make small changes, we want to make sure that we just want to see the changes that we made. So that's when you just click on this button here and this icon, apply changes, or you can use the shortcut, as you can see, Control Command R. Okay, we have debugging and so many other things here. Now, the most other important one is to stop. So this is the stop button, all right? Those are very important buttons or important menus that we should know about. And come down here again. Remember, we are inside of our design, okay, not text. We are inside of a design here. You're going to see some other menus button around here as well. This one is zoom in, so you can zoom out and zoom in to make it a little bit bigger. So I tend to zoom in a little bit more so you can actually see as I'm talking to you here. So it's more visible in the video format that I'm recording. Right? And here is the default English language that I created. You can add your own, and we'll look into that later, but you can change things there as well. And then here we have app theme. So you can actually change the app theme within Android Studio, this design view. Okay? Wouldn't need to worry about it right now, but when we talk about theming our apps, then you will see what that all means. Very good. So here is the API level. Android is a very complicated software development kit, meaning that there are a lot of different versions of Android SDK. So the software development kit or the libraries that compose Android. So at this point here, we picked 28. We'll talk more about that as well. Now here is very interesting because we can actually change the phone sizes when we're starting testing how things would look in different phone sizes. Because Android is very fragmented, meaning there are different manufacturers that can take Android being an open source, right? So anybody can take Android operating system and make their own changes and run on different devices, which means this is a wonderful, great thing. It's a blessing, but at the same time, it can be a curse because different manufacturers may have different specification of Android phone or device. Right? So different sizes, which allows for fragmentation. So it's always important once you have your application to see how it would look in different manufacturer devices. So we have tablets, we have phones, different sizes and so forth. So you can click on either of these and they will actually change the size. So let's click on this one here. You see, change the size, come down here and click on this one and things are changing. It's hard to see, but they are indeed changing, right? All right, so I'm going to go back to the first one we had before and bring it back that big. Okay, and the next thing here is that we can actually change the UI mode, the night mode, and so forth. And we can also change the portrait and landscape. So if we change the landscape like that, notice now everything is portrait mode. Our app is, okay, looking good. We can change back to portrait. Okay. Notice also when we change that, it goes back to the normal size. So I have to come back and zoom in. And then we have here this way in which we can change how do we want to show either with this blueprint or just design. So this, like I said before, this is the design because that's where we design. This is the blueprint. So we can actually see how things are being wired up. So if I just say design, notice we just have design. If I want to see the surface of just blueprint, there is only blueprint. If I want to design plus blueprint, and this is what you see. So you can play around and change it as you wish to do so. Okay. All right. So most of other things here we're going to be learning as we learn Android development. Like I said, this is such a strong and an amazing integrated development environment. So it has all these things that it's virtually impossible to learn in just one video. So you will get used to it. It makes sense as we continue learning things in Android. But before we go here, I just want to show you at the bottom here. This is where we'll see a lot of things happening. But I will make sure that we talked about at least these two, which is run. Now the run is actually spitting out this log here, console, spitting out everything that happens internally in our Android here in our application as it runs. Okay, so the run here is the console that shows everything that's happening internally as we run our application, right? So most of it will sound and look very gibberishy, meaning it won't make a lot of sense to us at this point. But later, as we get more into the Android development, these will start make sense. And of course, I will point things out, right? And then we have here the logcat. Logcat is similar to our run, but in fact, logcat allows us to read logs that we can put in our code so that we can debug or look through errors and see how our app is handling the data, the logic that we have been writing. And of course, we will be playing a lot in the logcat here and see what's really going on. Okay. The cool thing about logcat, you can actually create different logs in our code, and then we can search for exactly what is that we want to see, because it tends to have a lot of different things that are showing up. For instance, the zygote and all these things, it is again internal things that are happening that sometimes we don't want to use it or want to see it. We just want to see certain specific things that we know we want to check the value for, so we can search for it here. All right. And also, as you can see here, I can toggle things down. So this button here allows us to just put it down, hide it. If I want, click here, it opens, and there we go. And also, while it's open, we can click on this here, and we can show it in different places, right? You can't quite see here. I can move it to left, right, and so forth. So there's a lot of things we can do. We can pin it around and so forth. The same thing with any of these as well, right? Any of these tabs here, we can do the same thing. Okay. Very good. And of course, like I said, we can pin it down or close it down here. The same thing in this side here. You notice there's a lot of things going on. I can also close that, so we just have focus here, right? If I want, I can also close this component here, tree. There we go. And all we have now is just our user interface. If I wanted it back, I can come down here. If I wanted our component tree back, you can click here and it shows there again. Okay. And of course, you can see you can also move things around, right? You can float mode, you can split it, all sort of things. But I like to keep it this way, at least for now. All right, very good. So at this point here, should be mildly comfortable with Android Studio. If not, do not worry. In fact, I don't want you to be memorizing all of this, because I just want you to see how things work or where things are, so that when we start developing applications and learn more about Android development, this is not completely foreign. And you can always come back to this video and watch it. But I promise you, it may look very difficult right now and very foreign, but in a few more videos, once we start get going, it will all look so familiar. All right, I'll see you next. All right, folks, let's go ahead and spread our wings a little bit further here. So what we're going to do now is create another application. So let's go ahead and save file at the top here. New project. And I'm going to say, I just want an empty for now. Say next. And this one, I'm going to call this Make It Rain as such. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say com for the package name, build apps with Paulo, make it rain as such. You can change to whatever you want. But bear in mind that a package name is very important, because it is the ID of your application, especially later when you want to publish your application to the masses. And it's customary to do reverse domain name. So for instance, if you have a website called google.com, you would say com.google, and usually you say dot, put the name of this application here. Very good. So the main language here is Java. API level here, I'm going to keep at 4.4, which is KitKat, because at this point we want to make sure that these runs at least 95.3% of devices, so a lot more Android devices. And I'm going to say finish. We'll take a little bit here to do all of the builds to create our project. In a second here, we should be ready to start tackling our new project. Very good. So we seem to have everything done. And of course, as always, it goes ahead and create all of our project, all the files that we need, packages and so forth. And it gives us this main activity.java. Okay, very good. So what are we going to be building now? Well, as the name implies, it's going to be Make It Rain. So this application here will help us continue to solidify our knowledge of Android development here. Okay, so it's going to be rather simple, but we are going to gradually learn new things. Very good. So now that we have our project, let's go to our XML. So click here and you will see something that looks familiar. Right, so this is our design view, and we have here our palette, so we can have text, buttons, whatever we want, and we can drag and drop to our design view here. And like I said before, you can actually come here and do all of that. Let's close this down in code, right? So I can add, if I want to, another text view. So I can come down here, say open parenthesis that, and I can say text view and hit enter, and then I can start laying things out. So for layout width, I can say match parent, for instance, which means it's going to be the size of the entire width of our screen here. Height, I can say also match parent. Okay, so there's different ways to do this. Okay, that's our text, and I can give it an ID. So say ID, and there is our helper here. Hit enter, and it's going to say enter again. So this is how we create actual IDs that can be used in our main.java. Okay, so this I can say my item as such. So now our text has an ID, and if I want, I can pass in the actual text that for now I'm going to say hello. So if you do that, you're going to see that we have that hello at the top here. It's very small for obvious reasons, and look at that. There is our hello there. So I just wanted to show you that you can also do everything that we can do using our design here, we can do using our text here. Okay, so for the most part, we're going to be using our design here, but every now and then we're going to hop over to the text so that we can do some of our user interface creation here in our code using XML. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this, and don't worry, you'll have a lot of opportunities to actually create everything by hand. Very good. So now we have all of that. Of course, I'm going to get rid of all of this because we don't want that. And the first thing I'm going to do is, let's keep this a little bit bigger, is I'm going to double click. So if you double click, then it shows this attributes panel here, which allows us to give certain attributes to our view. Okay, so I can create a layout, so I can make sure that I have an ID for the entire view. In this case, we don't need that. But then if you want to change the background color of our view, of our window here, we can come up here. We can either search up here, or we can just click view all attributes. If you do that, then you can see it shows all of attributes that can be a little bit scary at first, but nevertheless they're not. Okay, so these are the things that we can actually give to our window here. For instance, if you want background, I can just come here and say background, and there we go, background. Click there, and I can click to the side here, and I can give a color, or I can click here and opens up this window here. This is the resources window. Resources are considered the other side of the equation when we're building Android applications, right? So anything that can be used in conjunction with our Java is considered a resource, such as a drawable, so an image. As you can see here, there's colors, arrays, and so many other things. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go for color. You can see we can actually get colors that come already pre-built with Android Studio. In this case here, what we want, we're just going to go ahead and get just a very simple color here. In fact, I can open up this Android here, which you can see has more colors. These are the project colors. As you can see, we can close, and these are the Android colors. Okay, so let's get perhaps this color here. Click, and there you go. And let me make sure you can see what's going on. Then you can say OK. And all of a sudden, the whole screen now is that color. In fact, if I save this and make sure that we have our emulator running, click Run. In this case, I don't have an emulator running, and I have a few of those. Let's use that one there. Say OK. Take a few seconds. We should see our new window application. There we go. Now it's rebooting. And after a few seconds, there we go, make it rain, and we have this very nice color here. Okay, so all applications, when you start them, they have this bar at the top here, which we'll talk about later. Okay, very good. So that was simple. That didn't take that much. And if you want to probe in again, you can go to text. You will see that now our background has this Android color halo. So it goes through this path at Android, meaning we're getting this color from the Android namespace, meaning the Android realm or the Android library. So we get this hollow blue light. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add some text at the top here. How do we do that? Well, click on our text palette here. I just want a simple text view. Put it right there. Make this a little bit bigger so we can actually see what's going on. And I'm going to put some constraints to the top. Constraints there, and as well to the right there. And I'm going to move that a little bit down, about 90 to 80 8 pixels there. If I want, I can hover over here and make it a little bit longer. That's nice, okay? And clicking that, I can actually make it in the middle and click on the actual text view. I can find ways to center that. Let's see, how can I center that? I can say center. All right, so we have our text here. So the next thing I want to do, if you double click here, it's going to give us the text view where we can actually change this, because at this point it's not saying what we want it to say. So what we want to say is, I want to say something as follow. You have colon like that. Very good. And it's kind of small and I want to make it a little bit bigger. How do I do that? Well, you remember, you can come up here, say size or S, text size. There we go. And I can click here and I'm going to say 18 for now. If I want, I can text style it, say I want it to be bold. There we go. And it looks very nice. So if I go ahead here and just go a quick reload there, we should see, hopefully, there we go. You have. Very good. So the thing here now, it looks like I lost my connection. Let's do it again. I want to put there. I want to also put right there. For some reason, we lost those connections there. That's interesting. But let's save now and see what's going to happen. We're going to go ahead and refresh again. That should be hopefully in the middle over there. Okay, so that's not bad. In fact, I want this to be a little bit up. So something like this. Let's do it again. This is not always necessary, but okay, there we go. We can always play around with this concept here, make sure everything is great, but this is okay. So we see here, we have our text. And at the bottom here, what we're going to do, we're going to add another text. I'm going to say, put it below that. And I want to constrain it to this you have. Say top text view like this. So this time I'm going to just follow it and I want to constrain it to that top or the bottom of the first text view we added. And then I'm going to constrain it to the right as well, and as well as to the left. So this is going to be, let me make it a little bigger. This is going to say something, double click. So this one I'm going to double click. For the text part of thing, let's get rid of this. The text here, double click, I want it to say something. I'm just going to say for now something like this, 2,000. Hit enter, and you can see now we have that 2,000 there. Of course, very good. So now we want to make it a little bit bigger. So you know how to do this. I'm going to say size or S. In fact, size, I think that'll be best. So text size, click down here, and I want it to be around 24. Okay, so that's pretty big there. Very good. So now we have, you have, this is the amount that's going to show. Of course, this amount is actually going to be all dynamic. Okay, and at the bottom here below, I'm going to put a button. So let's go to buttons here. I'm going to get this button here and drag and drop something like that. And I want to make sure that I constrain it with that. Put it down there. And I'm going to constrain also left and right as that. Okay, very good. So we are now making good progress. Let's save this and see how things are looking. Very good. It's looking decently okay. Nothing out of this world, but at least we know we have something going on there, okay? Very good. So we have this text, we have this button. Once you click, you see that ripple effect, which is exactly what we want. All right, so we're making progress here. In the next video, we'll continue putting together the user interface, and then we'll start tackling the actual Java code so that we can start allowing users, when they click on this button here, this number is going to start going up. So the idea here is make it rain. So every time you click here, this number is going to keep growing, emulating our bank account growing with cash. If only this was true. All right, folks, I'll see you in the next video. Now, one thing we'll notice here, although this looks centered, but it's really not centered here, okay? Because we made this text a little bit bigger or larger. We resized it. It kind of lost that format, which is desirable to put things in the middle of the screen, okay? Now, the reason why this is as such is because if you look at this layout width, we're actually giving the layout width as a number, okay? So whenever you put a number here, or rather, whenever we put constraints, a number is added here. And of course, when we make this bigger or smaller, the number also changed there. So although that is necessary in many cases, sometimes we run into these issues where things are not quite organized in terms of centered vertically and horizontally. So if you click here to fix this problem easily, we can come down here. Remember, it's very contextual, meaning whatever we click here to the left, any of these widgets, then they will be highlighted, and so all the changes we make to the right in attributes are going to pertain to that widget. So here we have this first widget, text view. If we change anything here, it's going to be for you have text widget. So what do we want to change here? Well, we want to change the way it looks. We want this to be always in the middle of the screen. Well, to make that, we can use an actual layout width that already is predefined for us. So if you open here, click this drop down menu here, you will have this match constraint and this wrap content. Wrap content really means is that whatever we put inside this view or this widget in this case, it's always going to be wrapped, meaning it doesn't matter how big it is, it's always going to use as much space as it can. Okay, so if I say wrap, all of a sudden you see there we go. Now it's in the middle of the screen because it readjusts itself to say, well, it's wrap content, so I'm gonna make sure that I am centered and I only use what I need to use in terms of space. So now you can see it is indeed in the middle. If I do the same with this, I can come down here and say wrap content as well. And you can see now they're both in the middle. In fact, this looks a little bit tacky, so I'm going to get rid of the colons there. So in order for us to get rid of the colon there, I can go ahead down here. To simplify, I'm going to go to our text here. In our text, you can see there is indeed this text attribute that we added and says you have, and we can get rid of the colon there. Now, something else happens here. If you noticed, okay, there's a lot of different things that we're going to be introducing slowly, right? So once we understand these things that we're going to be building next, are going to be faster because we are still in the learning stages of how to create very simplistic applications using Android Studio. Now, if you hover over here, it's going to say hard-coded string you have should use @string resource. So this is something that it's also important to realize when we develop our Android applications. The main idea here is that we must always strive to compartmentalize our resources code from our UI, user interface, from also our Java or our logic, right? That way, it's easier to change one thing in one place as opposed to having to change one thing in all other places that we may have added that thing. Meaning, if I keep doing like this, adding hard-coded text, it's not very sustainable because every time, think about it, if the application gets bigger, larger, every time I want to come and change I have to find where my activity main XML is and come down here and make sure that this is the correct one and having to change it. And if somebody else says, you know what, instead of saying you have, let's just say you, and I have to come back. So you can see that's tedious and not very good code practice, because that just distracts us from actually being productive and makes us having to always hunt down things that we have written hard-coded. All right, there are places and time to do this, but Android says, you can do this. As you can see, it's not an error, right? It's just a suggestion, a strong one that you should always listen to. So what is this saying here is that, well, you always have to move these texts or strings that you use in your user interface to a separate file called the string. In fact, if we come back to our project here, we're going to go to resources. There we go. And you can see we have values here. Instead of values, we have colors, we have strings, and have styles. They are all XML files. So if you go to strings, you notice that it has this string, it says app name and make it rain. We did not create, we actually did when we created the application. So I went ahead and create this string resource file that is now being used by our main activity internally to give the name to our application. So it's important to always come down here and add the actual strings that we want to use in our activity or in our application in general. Different ways to do this. We can come here, as I showed you, you open that. You can come here and actually open our less than sign here and start typing string. The moment you do that, you see there's two options, there's string and string array. We haven't talked about string array yet, but we want string. So if you hit enter, it goes ahead and gives us the option of adding a name. In this case, I'm going to say just title, and then I'm going to go ahead and close like that. The moment you do that, you notice that it allows us then to put what is the text that we want. So in this case, I can say you have, okay? That's one way. Now, how do we take this title here? Because now this is the variable, if you will, that will point to the text you have to make it show here. But very simply, we just go ahead and come down here and say at, right? Because we are accessing something, string, and look at that. The moment you do that, it tells us all of the things that we have in our string XML resource. Right? We have app name that you saw earlier and the one that we just added just now. Hit enter and voila, you can see now we have you have. But the difference here is that it's no longer coming directly from here. Notice it says add string. This just says, well, we are accessing string values in our resources and get the title which we created. It's this name title and just gives us the you have. That is one way to do this. The faster way, sometimes, I'm going to get rid of this. Get rid of that, I'm going to have a problem here. So I'm going to just get rid of this as well. I'm going to say you have, so put it back as it was. You have like that. The other way to do this is very simple. I can come, in fact, let's come down here. I can come to design here. I'm going to look at component tree. Open that. You can see now we have that component tree layout as we talked about, right? So everything, every widget that we've added into our user face is now showing here. Let's make it a little bit bigger there. Right, there it is. Now, you notice we also have this sort of warning that says hardcode string you have should be add string resource, right? So it's telling us, hey, yes, this is fine. It will always work, but it's not a good thing to do this because you're going to run into issues later on. Meaning we can now click on this and gives us more information, right? It tells us all these things and gives us the way to actually fix it. It says fix extract string resource, meaning just take that and put into a string. Click on fix like that. Notice it pops up this extract resource for us. It gives us a resource name. We didn't have to type this, but we can change if you want. I can change this to title and resource value. Remember, it's going to be you have, and everything is going to be inside of a string that XML. If you click like that, okay, and it's all done, but we still have other ones, right? Click those two, come down here, fix. I'm going to say this money value. There's the text for now. It's going to be on strings XML. Say OK. And I can continue. And it says also for the button, we have to do the same thing. Click here. I'm going to say button. That's fine. I can change the value I want. I'm going to say make it rain. And I say OK. And notice now everything is as we should have. And no longer we have these warnings that we had before, and everything is wonderful. Okay, and if you go back to our strings here, notice everything now is added for us. So those are different ways to add string resources so that you don't add them or hard code them in our XML here. It's a big no-no. Again, it works fine, but it's always a good habit to put everything inside of that string when it pertains to text or strings. All right, very good. There it is. So now if we save this, let's go see how this will look now. It should look different than that a little bit because everything now is nicely aligned and make it rain. Nothing is happening yet, but at least we know things are working. Very good. The other thing I'm going to add right now here, in fact, I'm going to do it using an actual XML text here. I'm going to come at the bottom here. Look, let me close this so we have more space. Remember, I need to be outside of this button here because we're going to create another button. Down here, I'm going to say button. So open there. I'm going to say button. So click. I'm going to make it wrap content. Wrap content. I'm going to give it an ID because all of them have ID. You just type ID. Hit enter. Hit the first enter there, the plus ID, because that means an ID that we put here is going to be the one we're going to be able to invoke in our Java code. And then I'm going to say something like show tag like this. Okay, very good. So now you can see there is the button there. Notice there's no constraints, and I can add all those constraints if I want also here. So we can use both of these views interchangeably. Now, so what we're going to do here, I'm going to add some sort of text inside, right? Now, here's the thing. I have not created the actual string, like we said before, to add the name for our button here, okay? So I'm going to say, click that, add string, but it's not going to be title because we don't want it to say you have, right? That's not what we want. We want something else. In this case here, it's going to be show tag, like that. We're going to have an issue here because it's not resolving inside of a string. There's no such thing as show tag, but we're going to create it. So click here, it says here, create value resource show tag. Click that, and resource value, I want it to say what? Well, I want it to say show tag. Hit enter, and all of a sudden you see show tag is there. And if you go to a string, look at this, show tag is there. Winning, right? Very good. So it's not that hard. Very good. So now I can even bring this down here if I wanted to and add the constraint. I want it to be at the bottom there. I can make it, perhaps make it there. And I want it to also constrain to the left and constrain to the left, to the right, I say. And as I do that, you can see these are being added. All of these attributes for our button have been added automatically for us. Look how wonderful this is, right? Very good. So if you save again, we should see a button at the bottom as well. Now, the reason why you don't see this button here is because we have an issue. This is too much at the bottom, so we probably should put it a little bit over there. We'll talk more about understanding where things are on our screen depending on device. There we go. Now that we moved a little bit up there, it's showing very good there. Okay, show tag, and we have make it rain. All right, congratulations. So we were able to put together this nice, easy to follow user interface here. So we've learned a few things. Most important thing here is that every time we want to add a string, meaning any text that we want to put inside of our user interface here, it's not a good idea. We should not put directly inside of our text attribute, right? Just hard coding here is not going to do it. So you must always, as I showed you, put everything inside of our string. Very good. I'll see you in the next video. So let's take a little detour here so we can understand exactly what I kind of mentioned before about understanding Android structures, the resources in our project, right? So the Android app structure is very simple because it allows us to abstract out or separate the code from the user interface and so forth. Now, here's the thing. When we create Android apps, what's happening here is that we create a user interface. So UI stands for user interface. So essentially, it's everything that users can actually interface with, right? So a screen that has a button, that would be a user interface. So far, we've created a few user interfaces of our own. So that is one compartment of our Android app. The next is the actual logic, which is the business part of thing, right? So logic business, where we're talking about, okay, getting these user interface here to actually communicate with our logic so we can actually do something, right? React to user touch. When they click a button, we want something to happen and so forth. But then how does that work? How does that happen, this connection? Well, in order for this to happen, there's this class, right? Because we need to connect these two. We have to then use this r.java class that already comes with Android Studio when you create our project. And I'll show you later where that is. Now, this r.java, it's what we call a resources class. So think of this r.java as a class that knows how and where all of the resources that are needed in our application are located and how to connect them to our logic business Java in this case. All right. So continuing, imagine that we have a button. When we create a button, we saw in our first application, we created a button. The idea is that when we click this button, we want for something to happen. Well, we need to connect that button to our logic business, right? Our Java part of thing. And we did that. And how we did that? Well, we use this find view by ID. And so you notice here we passed the R and we say, hey, R, go and find an ID that button. So this button here will be the ID of the button or of the widget that we gave an ID of button. In this case was a button, as you can see here. All right, so now we're communicating with this almighty class that knows exactly where things are in our user interface, which is a different compartment of our project. So define view by ID, like I said, there's that R again, which knows everything about our project structure. Specifically, it connects every resource in Android, not just the resources that we've added, meaning files that we added, such as PNGs or images, raw data, anything that we add that will enhance our application creation, it will know exactly where to find it. But also allows us to get other resources that already exist in an Android platform. Like I said, images, audio, video, RAWs, and layouts as well. Okay, so that is indeed the structure. So back to our project here, let's go ahead and figure out ways in which we can actually access all of these widgets we added. You should know now how to do this. But again, going back to understanding the R, if we go back to our project here, in fact, we already have our main activity. Let's just click on our main activity. There it is, our R. So what is R doing again? R.layout. So that means it's going through our project here, res, right? Because it's R, resources. This is resources. It knows exactly where to go. So it goes to our res, resources, goes and finds our layout, and finds the activity that main.xml, right? And then there we go, activity underscore main. You notice that it doesn't actually have to pass the XML here because it knows that activity main in this case is a layout form and it's going to be an XML type. So we don't need to pass the extension.xml. Okay, there it is, our R. In fact, if we were to come there and say R dot, look at this. So there's all these classes that allow us to access all these different resources. Drawable, you see this drawable here? There's a drawable. I can say value, R dot, there's drawable there. Very good. So in this case here, what do we need to do? As we said before, we want to go and fetch. First of all, let's go back to design here. Let's go ahead and fetch this first one here, this first text view. Well, you notice that this text view, because we have this first one here, and we have this second one here, because we didn't actually add our own IDs, Android Studio went ahead and gave us one. And you can see they're not very good descriptive IDs. So we should never just let Android Studio give us their own IDs unless we're doing something very simple. In this case here, text view 2, it has no meaning. Text view 1 or text view rather only, it also has no meaning, right? So we need to get this one here. So let's give it a nice ID here. I'm going to say money text like that. Okay, that's a nice ID. Hit enter. I'm going to say yes to update everything else. So there we go. There is our ID money text. In this case here, we don't need to change this ID here. Why? Because we're not going to need to access this text view in our main.java. So in that case, we just leave it as it is. That's fine if it has a D text view just like that. For our make it rain, I'm going to also say button. Like there we go. I'm going to say underscore. I'm going to say make rain like that. Enter, and this is going to say you need to update everything that has that reference as well. And notice it says this will update all XML references and Java R field references. And we, yes, want this to happen so that the whole system knows, now we've changed the ID of this item here, so everybody needs to know about this, just in case everybody or any one of you wants to access it. So of course we're going to say yes, and there we go. And for our tag, I'm going to do the same thing. Click on that. I'm going to say button, prepend it, and I'm going to say show tag. Hit enter, and voila. Now, if we go to our main activity here, as we always do, we're going to create a few things here. I'm going to say private button. As such, the first button is going to be what? I'm going to say show money. Say private button and say show tag, something like this. All right. Now we have our button types, instance variables, that we can then instantiate them. To instantiate them, we have to come down inside of our own create. I'm going to say show money is equal to what? Find view by ID. Hit enter. There is our dot what? ID dot, I want to say button make rain. Enter like this. I'm going to do the same thing to our show tag. I'm going to say find view r.id. I'm going to say show tag as such. If you save this, life is good. Right? So now we have connected our show money and show tag to these items that we created here. These views, 200 or 2000, make it rain, and show tag. Okay. And as you saw previously, once we have our button, we can come down here. I can say show money. I'm going to just say dot set on click listener as it is. I don't have to type everything, just hit enter. And inside here, I'm going to just pass an on click listener interface. I'm going to say new on click listener, hit enter, and voila, now we have this on click. Which means we can actually log things to our log cat here. So we can see down here if things are actually working. Right? Because we are still debugging, still fixing things out, make sure that users actually have a good application here, right? So we can actually just log few things that we want to see that things are actually working before we do the final code. So in this case here, we can use the log class to log something. Now the beauty here, because we are in Android Studio, we can just go and say log like this. Right? And you have a few different logs. Now, all of these logs are different levels of logging. We'll talk more about them, but this log D is log debug. Notice in this class here, okay, we'll say log.debug, we have to pass a text so we can say, okay, this debug log here comes from this method or so. So we can actually control and know exactly where things are coming from. This is just for us developers, right? So if I hit enter, then we have to pass this tag string and then the string, whatever we want to show. Hit enter like that. And this tag here we haven't created. I can go click here. For now, I'm just going to go and say my tag like that. We'll have a better description there, but that is fine, right? So there we go. So the message here that we want to show when we click this button here, which is show money, because we're setting it up so that when clicked, this will show, is going to be something like that. And in this case here, I can even add something like show money. Let's save and see what's going to happen. Let's go ahead and refresh that. Very good. And say make money. Let's go to our log and see if that happens. There we go. My tag, as you can see, on click, show money. Very nice. And the cool thing is, if you have a lot of things, as you can see, there's a lot of things going on, I can come down here and change to debug, because that's the level that I said I want to see things, the D here. I can change to debug only, and then it only show all the debugs. But there's a lot of other debugs that we don't care about, which means we can come and search here. Now I can search by my tag. I can say, for instance, my, let's see, it has to be exactly my, all cap, my tag, and now we can see it. So that helps us to just go straight to what we want to see, make sure it works. Very good. This works fine, and in fact, you could always do like this, and it's totally fine. You'll probably find me doing this way all the time. But Android has evolved so many times, and it's making things a little bit more easier on us developers. So lucky you, because when I started, things were a little bit rougher, right? So things are evolving, things change, technology changes, and that is a good thing. So you should be very happy about that. Meaning, now we don't really have to go through all of this to get this result that we're seeing here, this on click. In fact, I will show you. Now you can go straight to our activity XML. And let's go to, for instance, our text view. For each button, we can actually add a on click. So I can come here and say on click. Look at that. Now we have this on click method that if you go ahead and say enter, we can pass the name of the method that we want to call in our Java so that it will be called when users click this button. I can say here show tag, for instance. Okay. So now once we do that, if you hover over, you notice we have a problem. It says corresponding method handler public void show tag and passing the view is not found. Well, it's not found because we haven't created here. So now I can actually get rid of this. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out, and I'm going to go outside our void on create here, because that is just a method. Not just, it is a method, I should say. And at the bottom here, make sure we are outside of on create, right? So here I'm going to say public void, I'm going to say show tag. Now, I will have to pass a view like this. I'll explain in a second here. Now that I have this show tag, if we go back to our XML main there, notice this is no longer with issues. That means everything has been resolved. Ah, interesting. So now I can come and get this copy where we had previously, and I'm going to go ahead and put it here. So notice what's going to happen. If I save this and just do a quick run, and I'm going to open our logcat, and look what's going to happen. Remember, now I am doing show tag. Show tag, and look what happens. Like that, it said show money. Of course, I just copied and pasted. This should say show tag, of course, but that's not the point. The point is this is actually working as well. Very, very interesting. Now, the reason why we need to pass this view here, v, is very simple. I'll give you a secret here. That's very important. Everything in Android is indeed a view. So whenever we say show tag, because we want to make sure that we return something, in this case, we want something to happen, I should say, we want to make sure that this show tag is being passed through a view, because indeed, this is a button. The button is also a view. So for that to work, we have to always pass this view inside here, even though we didn't use it. In fact, if you get rid of this and save and give it a run, click, now we have a problem, right? And this is not good. It just says that, well, with a problem here, let's go to run here. Let's see what's going to say. All right, there we go. All of this problem here says illegal state exception could not find method show tag, which has to be passed a view in parent of ancestor. The reason why we have to pass the view, as I say, is that we need to make sure that the hierarchy in which things are happening as we create our views and we click on those views, they have to know which view is within which hierarchy in the view. I know it's a little bit complicated now, but I will explain with more details later. Just remember, every time you gotta pass a view here, always. In fact, this is what it told us in our main when we were creating this show tag. So if we come down here and say show tag, now we can see it says show tag has to have a view. Okay, very good. So there we go. So I can do the same thing, of course, with our other button, which is this one here. So come down here. Where you put this doesn't matter, really. So I'm just going to click, and this time is going to say make it rain. As such, we have that problem. Come to main and say public void make it rain view v or view, doesn't matter. I'm going to say log d. This is make it rain tapped, and of course I can go ahead and say my make it rain, something like this. It has to be a string, of course. Make it rain. That's fine, doesn't matter. Save that and do a quick run. We should be able to see some good results there. If all goes well, click make it rain. It says tapped. Click this one here, says show money. And of course you can see the log also showing there. In fact, get rid of this. You can see, there you go, and click show money, make it rain is also tapped, okay? So both ways, inside of run and logcat, you will see both showing, as you can see there, okay? All right, so that was a new concept here. Again, you can use both. Like I said, we have our show money, our show tag, we did find by ID, and we could use this set on click listener. In fact, like I said, you see me using both interchangeably. I just want to show you that there's this new way that you can just do. Saves you a little bit of code, right? But either way, it works. Good. Play around with this concept, and I will see you in the next video. So the idea is, of course, to make sure that as we add this or click or make it rain, we are going to increase our money in our bank. Okay, to do that, we simply create a variable at the top here, which will be our counters. So let's say private. I'm going to say money counter, and I'm going to set it to, it has to be an integer, so int. Let's set it to 0. Okay, initialize it to 0 as such. And then simply in our make it rain, we are going to increment each time that we tap on the button, right? So I'm going to say money counter. I'm going to increment, so I'm going to say plus equal as such, and I'm going to increment by 1,000 like this. So each time that we tap, it's going to come in, counter, say 0, it's going to just add 1,000 to it. So that means it's going to be 1,000. Next time, counter is 1,000, increment by 1,000, 2,000, and so forth. To see that in action, I'm going to just go ahead and append our money counter here so you can see. Save this and quick run and open our run. Let's see what's going to happen. Say make it rain. There's 1,000 first time. So it'll be 2,000. Keep going. And voila, you can see that it's working perfectly. Very good. So the idea now is that we know that the tapping is working fine. We are incrementing our money. Everything is looking great. But now is the time for us to actually show that amount in here, in our text here. Because this is static. We added this so that we can visually see what would go there. This is not good because we have to change that dynamically. Well, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we'll have to come down here, of course, to see our user interface. And let's go to our text. We say money text, that is the ID. So we already have the ID. Now we have to infer to it. To do that, we can come down here and say private. In fact, you notice that this show money and show tag, they no longer really are needed. In fact, we don't need to have this at this point, right? So I'm going to just go ahead and comment this out. All right. So I'm going to also comment this out here. The reason why I'm commenting it out is because if you wish to use this way, using the set on click listener, you would obviously have these instance variables button and other button so that we can then find view by ID as you saw here and then do all this. Okay. So, but because we're using this different way of doing it to actually create the methods, as you can see here, and we have the names of the methods on click inside of XML, then we don't need to do that as I previously explained. Okay, so getting rid of that, but we have to add, of course, something else. What is that we're going to add? We're going to say private, and I'm going to say a text view. That's a text view type we need. I'm going to say money text like this. Okay, let's say select everything and make sure that everything is formatted right. So now we have money text here. We can come inside of our money text. I'm going to say find view by ID, r.id dot money text. Okay, there we go. So now we have a handle here. That means we can then set the text to something which is going to be, in this case, our counter. So easily I can come down here. I'm going to say money text dot set text. I'm going to say money counter like that. Let's save this and give a quick run. Make it rain, and we have an issue. What is the problem, folks? Let's go there. It looks like resource not found, string resource ID. Let's find this, making sure that our ID is, yes, that is indeed ID money text. Let's say integer dot toString like this, and we're going to put all of our money counter inside there. There we go. So it turns out, because this is indeed an integer, we cannot put inside of text as it is. So we have to actually change it to make it a string. But now we have a problem here because it says consider using string.format. Again, that's the beauty of having a nice IDE such as this one, because it gives us hints of things that we should do. In this case here, I can come down here, click there. And of course here, I can either suppress this warning, but we don't want to do that. So I'm going to say follow what they tell us to do. So we've solved this problem here, but not quite, because now we have some sort of a warning that says, well, instead of using this, how about using this different format here, which is going to be string.format instead. But instead of that, actually, I'm going to use something else. It's going to be actually the same idea, string.value of. I like this because it actually go ahead and translates whatever this money counter is. In this case, it's an integer, and makes it a string type of it, so that then the set text will know exactly how to render it. Meaning this now is indeed a textual format of 1,000. If you save this, we should be able to see things actually working. Let's say show money, 1,000, 2,000, and so forth. Okay, that's another way of formatting things that are from different type and make it all work. All right, so there we go. So now we can see you have 7,000, keep adding 8,000 and more, and so forth. So you can keep going and the number will keep growing. Now, one other thing you will notice here is that this number here looks great, but not necessarily. Wouldn't that be great if we actually had a way in which we could format this number so that it looks like a currency, right? Usually with the $sign and so forth. Now, the cool thing about programming, if you haven't noticed right now, is that there's always different ways to do the same thing, but there is always indeed the best way. What that means is that there is a class called format class that allows us to format all sort of things, all sort of numbers, all sort of dates, and so many things. So let's use that. Now, you may ask, so how do I know where to find such thing? Well, always Google. I know it may seem very trivial, but it's true. Whenever you have a question that you don't understand or something that you're like, how do you do that? You just Google it, okay? Say, for instance, how to format Android numbers to currency. And then you will find different ways that people show you how to do that. As simple as that, okay? Very good. So here's what we're going to do. Notice we're inside of our make it rain. So at the top here, I'm going to say number format. I'm going to call this number format like that is equal to number format. Notice that we don't have to instantiate this. I'm going to say dot, and I can then say get currency instance. All right, there we go. So now this format pointer, this format type here, number format, will allow me to format anything to show currency. How do we use that? Well, we use that very simply in this manner. So what we're going to do here inside of our money or string.value, where we're translating this integer value into a text or string so that we can actually show it, we're going to call it. So I'm going to say format or number format dot format. Notice we can pass all sort of things here, right? We can pass numbers and so forth. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pass this number money counter. Cut that and put inside there. There we go. Now this number format here, it knows exactly what to do. It's going to take this number and make sure that it translates it to a currency. So it should now look something like this. 1,000 and perhaps decimal points like that. Okay. Now notice this get currency is very interesting because what it does, it gets the currency of the locale of your Android device. So if you live in a part of the world where you don't use this notation, this format of currency, obviously you're not going to see this. So it all depends on the language that you're using on your phone, which is very handy because our applications are meant to be used all over the world. Okay? So this is a good way of using our number format. And there we go. We say number format. We say dot format, invoking the method, and then we pass the amount or the number we want to format. Look at this. So let's save this and do a quick refresh there. All right, let's give it a try. So remember this 2,000 here is from our code that we hard coded before. So it doesn't count. Let's say make it rain and look at that. 1,000, 2,000, and nice. Keep going and the number keeps going. All right, there we go. So we're able to get our number format from our library here, java.text library as you saw, and we use that, we leverage it to actually format our money counter so that it looks exactly like money. So now I said you have $19,000. Oh, wouldn't that be great? You can keep going and you're making it rain. All right, folks, very good, very good. And of course, our log is still working because we still have it working there. But usually you want to get rid of that once you know things are working, right? Because you don't want to have all these logs happening all the time. Very good. So now you have this application working as intended. So it keeps going and the money keeps growing in our bank account. So our app is working perfectly. Okay, so you can see money is growing and there are things we can do. For instance, if we want to make this number a little bit bigger in terms of the text font, you know how to do that now, right? So you go to main activity or activity.xml. We go to text. In fact, we go to design. We could go to text and change that as well. For instance, here, text size, we can say 34. That save, you can see that it's pretty big. Okay, let's make it a little bit more open there. Very good. Save, and let's go ahead and rerun that. There we go. Very good. So now it's very visible. And the other thing we're going to do here is to move this a little bit right in the middle there. And the cool thing is, let me make this a little bigger so you can see. We can actually use the guideline. You see those dashed lines? So that is our guideline. It tells us exactly where we are. And also notice that I can use interchangeably this view here or this view. It's pretty much the same, right? So I can guide around and make sure to find the middle. And there we go. You can see now this is horizontally aligned, centered. Very good. So save that. We should probably make sure to see that this is actually show tag. It should now be very well aligned in the middle of the screen. Very good. Again, if you can't see, depending on your emulator that created, if you can't see it, just move things around maybe to the top or a little bit to the bottom, and we'll deal with that at a later time when we talk about making sure that everything shows on the screen independently of the size of the screen. Very good. And the next thing we notice here is that every time we run this app, we notice that the 2000 is showing constantly, right? And that is not good. How about just put 0 there? Well, what we can do, we can go to our text string, because that's where everything is set up. I'm going to just go ahead and take care of this by taking all the zeros. Just have 0 like that. Save. Let's check it out. Now, every time it's going to start at 0. So make, and then you're going to start adding. Okay, very good. So that's looking really good. You can make other changes as you see fit. Now, one last thing we need to do here, notice we have this show tag button. Now, this was not necessary at all. I just wanted to show you another important component of Android development called Toast. What is a Toast? Well, Toast is another class in Android that allows us to show and create small messages that will pop up on the screen to give users some sense that things are happening. Okay, so let's say if you click something and you want to tell the user that they have indeed clicked or that was clicked and there's something that's happening in the background, we usually use a toast. So we're going to go back to our main activity here. So go to our show tag here. I'm going to get rid of this. And here I'm going to create a toast message. A toast message, like I said, is a toast class. So I'm going to have to say toast. There we go. I can straight go and say toast make text like that. And it requires a few things. The first thing that it requires is the context. What is context? We'll talk about context at a later time, okay, with more details. But think of a context as this class in Android that knows everything about how things are being rendered on our screen. So the context will know, for instance, when we put a button on the screen, it will know when we want to pop something out or show on the screen. It will know everything. So it knows how to rearrange everything inside of our user interface and so many other things. Okay, so because a toast is literally a little message that pops out, so it is per se a view, if you will, it will be added to our window. Therefore, anything that is added to our window or anything that deals with Android internals, we have to pass a context to it. Okay? Now, how do we pass a context? Well, in Android, we can just go ahead and say get application context like this. Then we will get our context. And the next thing we need to pass here, of course, is the sequence of the text that we want to show. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and say hello there. And then the last thing is the duration this will show, this message. Because remember, this is supposed to show for a little bit and then fade out. So the duration here, we're going to just use a static class here. I'm going to say toast.length. So it's going to be a duration that we want. So the length could be short or long. I want short, like that. Okay. Once we have created our toast here, we need to show it. I can say dot show. That's very important and easy to forget, right? We may end up writing all of this and finish here and wonder why isn't it showing. We have to call the .show method so that it can show the message. So again, we have to pass the context for the reasons that I've just explained, and of course the text that we want to show, and also we have to pass the duration for the message to show on the screen. All right? Now you notice something here. When I was putting this text here, let's go back down here. If we get rid of this, I'm going to say again, comma, like that. You notice here, we could actually say r dot string dot and get something like app name. That is totally valid. Why is it valid? Well, the strings XML here has all these strings which are resources that we can always access. There are times that we also want to put all these strings, not just for our user interface, in this case, our activity main XML or any other activity main XML that we may have, but also we could create here a string resource that we want to use here, right? So now I want to save this. Let's go ahead and give a quick run. Oh, you saw real quick there. That was actually a toast. So show tag, look at that. Make it rain. It's showing for a few seconds and it's gone. Okay, there we go. As you can see here, it's not a very useful item for this application. It makes no sense, but I just want to show you this new toast class and call the make text, right? We then pass the context because it's very needed because we're showing something to the screen. And then we pass in a text here. It could be a text that we write ourselves or a text that we put inside of our strings, that XML. And of course, we have to make sure that we say the length for how long it will show and never forget to say .show. All right, folks, very good. So at this point here, we have a working application with this show tag button that shouldn't be there, but at least it made us learn something new there. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to actually make this better. All right, I want you to put an if statement, if you will, inside here that says if this number here, as we go and say make it rain, gets to a certain number, we want to change the color, for instance, of the text. Or we want to put a message here that said, whoa, you're really getting richer. Okay, so you know how to do these things now because you know how to put a text view here, you know how to do if statements, and you also know how to add things to our text views dynamically. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. Do all the things that you want to do, but one thing I want you to do is to make it so that it shows a message or just change the color dynamically of this text here, the money, when it gets to 10,000 or even 50,000, whichever number you want, so that it gives a visual cue to the user that indeed they are making a lot of money. Wonderful. I know you can do this. I'll see you in the next video. So the challenge that I gave you earlier was to figure out a way to change this color here as we say make it rain, right? At a certain point, let's say at 20,000, I wanted you to change the color of the text here, right? So if you were able to do this, congratulations, and I hope you were able to also share that with all of us so we can congratulate you on this awesome challenge. If not, no worries, and right now I'm going to show you one of the ways in which you can do that. Now the cool thing here is that we could have used if statements, right? We could have say if my counter is equal to say 20,000, and then we're going to change the text color because this is just a text view. Now, let's see how do we actually change a text view in code here, or rather, how do we change the text view color? Well, simply, if we go back to our project here, in fact, I don't need to go there. Let's go back to our main activity XML there. If you look at this would be a text view, as you know, so would this, but let's click on this one here. So you notice here, I can come up there and search for, let's say, color. The moment you type color, you're going to see there's shadow color, there's text color highlight, text color hint, and text color link, and all sort of things, right? Now this text color link here, it has a color because it comes with the theme of our Android app. We'll talk more about themes at a later time. But in any case, you can see here we have a text color. So you can actually come here, just like we did before. You can even add a text color here, a color you want, or you can click here and get one of these colors. Now we can get color from our color, as you can see there. There's this color project from array, which we don't have, from styles, and all sort of things, right? So if we go back to color here, there is this Android colors we can choose from, okay? So we can change the color of our text this way. But at this point here, what we want to do, we don't want to change our color right now. We want to change it dynamically, right? Once certain conditions were met. To do that, it's very simple. Let's practice a little bit here. So I can say money text, because it's just a text view, right? Say dot set text color. Now the set text color, it says that it requires an integer because the color that we have to pass here has to be a int color. Now the reason why it's an int is because, well, first of all, the way Android library was built. As time goes by, you notice that a lot of things that are related to user interface are integers, because you can see here the int res ID. That means we can actually pass a resources ID inside here. meaning I can put colors. Let's go back to our project here. Notice if we go to values, there is indeed a colors XML. Look at this. All these colors are actually added automatically for us. We can actually put our own color here too. I can say color, give it a name, say my color, and I'm going to pass a hex color. So hex color represents colors in the web and of course in many other development kits. In this case here, you have to start with pound, and then you can go ahead and say CED like this. That would suffice. And you can see here we have the color. If you click that, notice you have this tooltip, so you can actually change the color yourself here, right? So let's say if I want to get this color here, the moment you click that, look at that. It went ahead and changed to the actual hexadecimal there. Okay, so it's pretty handy. So whenever you want to add a color for your application here inside of our colors.xml, you could come here and do exactly as I did. So always put something first and then click here. Then this tooltip is going to show up and then you can change as you wish to change. So for us to set our color here, what we need to do, let's go ahead and say money.set text color, as you can see there. Okay. There's a few things we can do here. There's this set color where we can just go ahead and pass the int. Let's try that. So I'm going to say r.color and get my color. Notice we're going to have a problem here. If you hover over, it's going to say we should instead use the get resources method, right? That get color and then pass the my color. That's how we should do this. Now you may say, well, why is it so complicated? Why can't we just go ahead and do like this? There's a lot of things that happen when we just access directly as that, especially when it comes to getting resources. Now, in certain cases, it's easier to do so because if you remember correctly, to find view by ID, just say r.id money.text. But for anything else, you have to use the get resources method. Now, the get resource is one of those methods because we're inside of an activity, it's just available to us. So I can go ahead here and say get resources, right? Dot, I can say then get color or can get whatever else that I would want. In this case is get color. So I'm going to say get color and I need to pass something. And it gives us an idea of things that we can pass. At the top here, we have this colors res int ID. So color resource that we can pass here, which is going to be an int ID. Like I said, when we're passing things around through the R, usually everything comes in as an integer. That's why we have the int type. Okay, so in this case here, I'm just going to say r.color.mycolor. And voila, now we have it all working. Sometimes, depending on the level of the API that we're using to build this application, we will see some sort of warnings and errors and so forth. But most of the time, this is how you would do it. Very good. So I'm going to save this. If you do that, let's go ahead and give it a quick run. At this point, we're just testing things out to make sure that things actually work. So let's go ahead and say make it rain. The moment you do that, it went ahead and gave us this color here because it's inside of our make it rain. So right away, the moment you click on it, goes ahead and changes the color to my color, which is what we did here. We created this my color there, right? So I can come again here if I want to change to something a little bit less aggressive. If I save, refresh again, the moment you click, look at that. There's that yellow color here. Okay. And the beauty also here in our main, you can see the color has changed here as well. Very good. So now we understand how to set text color or how to add those attributes that we were able to add in our visual representation here in our design. Coming to our attributes here, obviously we can always do that also in our main activity. That's the idea, right? So everything, all the properties that we can access, attributes we can access in this form here, obviously we can then access them as well using straight Java. But okay, so now we understand how to get our colors and how to put them there. So how do we then go through and say, for instance, once we get to 30,000 or 20,000, we want to change this color here to make this a little bit more dynamic? Well, it's very easy. We can use the if statements, right? Say if my counter is equal to 20,000, for instance, then we run this code. But that would work if we only have one if statement, because in this case here, I want to create some sort of hierarchy that would say, okay, at 20,000, we are going to change the color, let's say to my color. And at 30,000 or at 60,000, I'm going to change to another color and so forth. Okay, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to introduce to you here a switch statement. A switch statement is very handy because it tackles all of these problems, especially when we don't want to nest everything into an if statement. Okay, so in this case here, I can say switch, there we go. And a switch here, it will require some sort of expression here to pass what is it that is going to regulate our cases, because switch has its cases, right? So the idea is if something is 1000, for instance, our counter is 1000, that case is going to do something. Okay, if in case of our money counter here is 30,000, we're going to do something. So that is the idea here. So we need to pass an expression. Now, what is the expression we're going to pass here? Well, simply we're going to pass the money counter, because this is indeed what's going to be driving our switch case here. Make sense? So I'm going to put the body, and then I'm going to start with the case. So what happens in the first case? Well, the first case is when? Well, the first case I want to be 20,000, like that. And I put colon, like this. That means then inside here, I'm going to run something. The moment money counter gets to 20,000, in case 20,000 here, we want to change the color. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, or cut it all, and put it all there. Okay? Except I don't want to add this color here. That was just an example. I want to add a different color, for instance, a black color. So I can actually come and say color using the color class dot. Now, the color class you can just use whenever you want. There are already some predefined colors. We can just call them right away. So in this case here, I can pass, for instance, black. Look at that. And that works. Except it doesn't. The reason why is because it's expected a color from resource ID, because we say we want to get from resources get color. So this we're not getting from our colors resource here. That's why it's having a problem. So how do we solve this? So like I said, there's always different ways of doing things in Android. This works if, as you know by now, if we want to get the color from our resources that we added here ourselves. But if we would just want to use the color class, as you saw here, we could just go something like this. Money text dot set text color and say color class dot black. Voila. And we don't need to do this. Now, the cool thing here, we also have to go ahead and say break. We have to put the break to say, okay, once it's 20,000 and do this, and just going to break out of this to then continue with our case. The next case is going to be what? I want something to happen at what? At 40,000. Let's keep going. 40,000 there. Port colon. I'm going to do money text dot set color like that. I'm going to say color dot yellow. Okay. Break again. Now the case is going to be case when I am at 60,000. What I want to happen, again, money text set color. I'm going to say color dot green. So we are really getting rich at this point. Do break. Okay, there we go. We can continue with many other cases as you wish. In fact, I want you to do so, but I will stop here. Now, to finish our switch case here, we need to put a default case. So every switch case should have a default case. In this case, we don't need to put anything our default. We could say as a default case, meaning that nothing has been reached. For instance, it's not 20,000, it's not 40,000, whatever. It's just plain default. We can say something like, okay, set color to something else, but we don't want to do anything. In this case, we can just leave as it is, and I'm going to just go ahead and break out of it. Okay, very good. So I'm going to get rid of this and put it at the top here so you see other ways to get from resources. I'm going to say here, get colors from our colors.xml resource. Like that. And that's it. So now we have money counter inside our switch. Each time it should work. If it's 20,000, it's going to change the color to black. If it gets to the threshold of 40,000, it's going to make it yellow, and 60,000 green. Let's go ahead and give it a test so that we can see all of these in action. All right, so applied changes. I'm going to go, let's see, 20,000. And voila, now it's black. Let's keep going to 40,000. Voila, there we go, it's yellow. Oh, let's go 60,000, see what's going to happen. And there we go, 60,000. Now it is indeed green. All right, there we go. So I know this took a little bit longer, but that was because I wanted to show you these switch case statements here as a new way of doing that. And of course, you could have done this using an if statement. All right, perfect. I'll see you next.